There is no doubt that each man is justified in using force if necessary to defend himself against physical harm, against theft of the fruits of his labor, and against his enslavement by another. Indeed, the early pioneers found that a great deal of their time and energy was being spent in defending themselves, their property, and their liberty. But in order for man to prosper, he cannot afford to spend his time constantly guarding his family and his property against attack and theft. So he joins together with his neighbors and hires a sheriff. At this precise moment, government is born. The individual citizens delegate to the sheriff their unquestionable right to protect themselves. The sheriff does for them only what they had a right to do for themselves, nothing more. Now let us go a step further in the question of man's right to delegate power. Suppose Pioneer A has one horse. He also wants another horse, but does not have the money or other means to buy one. Pioneer B has 3 horses, and Pioneer A decides that he would like to share in his neighbor's good fortune. Is he entitled to take one of his neighbor's horses? Obviously not. If his neighbor wishes to give it or to lend it, that is another question. But so long as Pioneer B wishes to keep his property, A has no just claim to it. If A has no proper power to take B's property, he obviously cannot delegate any such power to the sheriff. Even if everyone in the community desires that B give his extra horse to A, they have no right individually or collectively to force him to do so. They cannot delegate a power they themselves do not have. No government can justly claim the power to seize and redistribute the people's wealth and property, or to force reluctant citizens to perform acts of charity against their will. Government is created by man, and no man possesses any such power to delegate to government.
The simple fact that the federal government does not own all of us and does not own the states and cannot control the states and cannot tell your sheriff what to do. And the issue, I think, is an important one. Are we going to maintain our freedoms in this country, or are we going to allow our own government to continue to crescendo out of control? Right. The issue we were fighting was the one that we had damage on, and that is jurisdiction.
Right.
Does the federal government own your local sheriff? Does the federal government have the authority and the constitutional jurisdiction to tell your sheriff what to do? The only way that can happen is if the sheriff acquiesces and goes along voluntarily.
Which many do.
Which many do.
That's the unfortunate
regrettably,
part. Right.
Regrettably. And I am one who still believes in the best way to solve an issue is on the local level. There's 3 areas that the Constitution allow for federal law enforcement. Right. There's 3 areas. Mm-hmm. And this is on Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. Felonies committed on the high seas, counterfeiting,
right,
and treason. Those are the only 3 crimes that are constitutionally allowed for a law enforcement authority.
On the federal level.
At the federal level.
Right.
Right.
And they don't.
Back to this, the gun issue, there's no greater evidence that our Constitution is in trouble than it is with the gun control issue. Mm-hmm. If our government, which is specifically forbidden from instituting gun control, it's constitutionally forbidden. And if you look at the history of our country and look at what the Founding Fathers said about the Second Amendment and about gun control, you will know how far out of control and run amok our own federal government it is. And I'm so pathetically, absolutely sick of my own government being the entity that is trying to steal my God-given freedoms away from me.
Right.
They are there to protect our freedoms. The proper role of law enforcement is the same as the proper role of government, and that is we are here as government officials to protect freedoms. Did you know that your police officers are supposed to protect freedoms? True. Individual freedoms?
Right.
And yet most police officers have been reduced to revenue collectors. You know, write the tickets, write the tickets, write the tickets. And gun ownership is a personal choice. It's not my government's choice whether I have a gun or not. And you know, the people in my county, if they had guns, wasn't none of my business unless they had intended to commit a crime with it. And then people are going, oh, well, isn't it your job to make sure they don't? It really is not. I'm not supposed to go door to door and say, what do you plan to do with that gun?
Right.
You know, do you have any other weapons in the house that you want to commit a crime with?
Yeah, what about these rocks in your garden?
Yeah, you're not thinking about stabbing your wife tonight with a butcher knife out of the kitchen, are you?
Right.
You know, that's not the role of law enforcement. It's not. And in fact, the book right here, that's a great segue into the book, The Proper Role of Law Enforcement. And this is the book that I wrote so that law enforcement officers would remember their oath of office. The oath of office requires that your local law enforcement authorities continue to keep their oath of office to uphold and defend the United States Constitution. That's what this book is about. It says, no more compromise. If you take all my rights, take them all. But I'm not going to piecemeal my rights away or cut the tail a little bit at a time until the whole tail's gone, and then you go after the rest of the body. No. The answer is no. If it's really about freedom, why would I compromise? Because if I compromise, that means I'm giving up some of my freedom. In America, you want me to give up some of my freedom because we have problems all across the country? But to answer his question, you 16-year-old teenagers or you freshmen and college students, if you want to be free, you have to know the truth. And you have to be educated, and then, after you know the truth, you can defend your rights. But you can't defend what you don't know.
But they still...
What can I do as a police officer? What can I do as a soldier to help stop this headlong rush into a socialist dictatorship, totalitarian system in America? And we said it's very simple. Just obey your oath. They made you swear an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States, protect the people's rights and their liberties. Just do that. And a despotism or a tyranny cannot happen. Enforcement officer actually is there to serve and protect the system from the people. You see, so it's 100% different today than what it used to be.
Well, we've got a shot of these two officers now. Which is which?
Okay, the one on the right is the peace officer that served and protected the people even from a system that had gone awry, in political leaders that would usurp powers and so forth. That person was sworn to protect the people and their rights and their liberties, which all officers still today are. But when you go into the police academy today, you're not trained as a peace officer there to serve and protect the people like the officer on the right. You're served today as you're being militarized, you're being given military equipment, you're being given military training, you're becoming a part of the state, and you actually are trained to violate your oath, and instead of serving, protecting the Constitution and the people, you follow all orders regardless of what they are, and you become a servant and protector of the system. Which is, as you know, about 20 years ago, we threw God out of our system, and today the state is God. So it's very important for the police officer and soldier to be trained that the highest authority in the land today is government, and they're there to serve and protect government, because if government falls, then the people will suffer. See, so there is a lot of wonderful things when you begin to study the founding documents of this country and the law, and the lawful system we're supposed to be under, the common law and those things, is that you have police powers that come from nowhere but the people.
Right.
You see, the people, there is no police power unless you go to the sovereign people. And actually, the way police officers started is towns had a butcher, a baker, and people, the blacksmith and the banker and the school teachers, and they didn't have the time to go